Hello, I'm Dr. Larry Carnes. Welcome to another exciting episode of Spotlight TV. We're so glad that you could join us today, and we're excited to have a special guest with us today, David. And David's going to be speaking to us about some exciting books that he has. David, hello, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, doctor? And thanks for having me on your program.
Oh, it's a pleasure and an honor for you to be with us. Briefly, introduce yourself to our audience and just tell them a little bit about who David is.
Okay. My name's Dave VerValin. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Went to school at Purdue University. Was drafted in the Army in '67. Spent some time in Vietnam. Came back, finished my degree at Purdue, and became a construction project manager. I now am married, lived in Tip City, Ohio. Have three children, two stepdaughters, and 8 grandchildren. I love history and love reading.
My. So you have quite a family there. My God. So you're a Vietnam veteran.
Right.
Served during the Vietnam era, where we have something in common there. And then, so let me tell you, your interest in writing, I noticed Voyager. I thought that was quite interesting. And as I was reading through it and navigating this journey, talk to us, tell us about Voyager, and just lead us into the other books that you've authored.
Okay, well, Voyager is the first book in a trilogy called Huaka'i. And Huaka'i is the Hawaiian name for a voyage. So the first book in that series is called Voyager. The second is Dark-Haired Woman, and the third is Full Circle. Now, this book begins in 1941, which I think is a very interesting part of the time of American history, just before World War II breaks out, when the young man, being Skiles, graduates from the University of Hawaii and sets himself on a voyage to go around the world, which would take about 1 year. Unfortunately, halfway around the world, the war breaks out, unbeknownst to him, and Pearl Harbor is bombed. The United States is drawn into the war. He can no longer go forward because of the Japanese involvement in the Pacific, and he can no longer go back because the islands that he needed to support himself have been blocked off. So he has to land in Australia, where he joins the Navy and becomes a PT boat captain. So this first book is a story of World War II from the PT boat perspective, which has not been written about too much, and the pros and cons of his environment and the impact of the war on his environment, and how he continues to try to move forward in his vision of moving around the world at the same time being caught up in the war. The second book, Dark-Haired Woman, is a story about the visions that he has during the war of a dark-haired woman dressed in gold and a red book that has a major impact in his life during the second half of the war, and how he proceeds out of the war and continues with the rest of his voyage. The last book, Full Circle, is really a story about how the Japanese, while they're in Japan or in China, are looting the country and sending gold and artifacts to Japan, and how he intercepts, unbeknownst to him, some of that supply train back to Japan. And he is then forced after the war to go back to one of the old battlegrounds where he helps a group of people try to find that treasure to kind of point that there was in fact a looting of China by the Japanese.
Wow, now that's powerful. So you're navigating the journey of this individual and the different seasons that he's experiencing in his life.
Right.
That's powerful.
And there are these outside sources that impact not only the war, but these outside sources that impact his life, not only through the war, but after the war, that, have a big demand on his character and his perseverance to be able to pursue his vision of what he wanted to set out to do, and that is to fulfill his journey around the world.
That is powerful. So now, as he's navigating this journey and he finds these distractions taking place, let me ask you, when you wrote these books, is it fiction or is there truth and some real life experiences in these books?
Well, the history, I'm kind of a history nut. So the history portion of the fictional history is exactly right on. The war portion is actually the battles taking place by the PT boats, Squadron 10, which was an actual squadron at the time. Those battles actually existed. The time, the days, the time of the moon phases are actually right on, the whole 9 yards. That is truth of the actual book, and that carries throughout all 3 books. But the characters, of course, are fictional.
Yes.
Those characters are sort of, I suppose, a reflection upon the writer a little bit. You know, every writer probably puts a little bit of himself into those characters.
Yeah.
I've never been on a PT boat, but I think, you know, you kind of say, well, what would I do in this instance? You know, and so you kind of write about how your feelings would be, how you would handle that situation. And of course, you introduce some new characters and stuff, but it's a reflection of yourself, and there's no doubt about that.
That's powerful. So now that's where we come into the power and the privilege of imagination as you use your imagination as you're writing. I thought it quite interesting. I was looking there at Voyager, and something in the introduction, there's a statement, your past can come back to haunt you. Unpack that for us.
Well, that's kind of comes back to the 3rd book. He loses a loved one, several loved ones through the whole story. And it really has an impact on his life. It becomes part of his life that he never really deals with. And he takes it with him for years and years of lamenting about his losses. It really affects his life. And in the 3rd book, surprisingly, one of these loved ones comes back to him. Something that he thought he had lost forever is revealed to him, which kind of helps him pull together his life at the final end of the book, and to proceed then with his voyage through life. Because the book Voyager, the 1st book and the whole book Huaka'i, is not only a story of his voyage, but it's a story of his voyage through life. And so sometimes, as you know, your initial journey is not necessarily how you end up. Yes. You know, and it's the perseverance of your life that finally you end up with a goal that may not be what you set it out for, but it's something every bit as satisfying as what you really intended to do.
Wow. So what I'm hearing as you're speaking, it's the ability to make those necessary adjustments during the journey and still end up with having a quality life or a quality experience.
That's right. And I think that's something that the readers can relate to, because it happens to all of us. We all started out in life with a dream of doing something when you're out of high school or college, wherever it might be. I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do that. And things happen in your life. You know, you find somebody else in your life, they have impact, outside things happen to your life, and your course has changed. But it doesn't mean you can't end up at a place where you feel good about yourself and good about your journey through life.
Wow. Now that's powerful. So learning, lessons learned, and then learning how to navigate the journey of life as you learn the lessons. So now there's that internal compass, and this is powerful what you're speaking about. Speak to us about that as the character and that internal compass that he had and how he navigated life.
Well, he tends to, you know, during the war, you know, he still has to be a PT boat captain. He can't let the side problems affect his life and his command. So he drives it down within himself, and he kind of faces those problems in that journey by himself, alone on a small boat during the war. Some of his friends realize that here's a problem, but you don't want to shake the boat too much, literally, because there's a war to be fought, and so he's kind of forced to live this thing by himself, and yet carry on his life as if nothing is wrong. And it's not really until the end of the war and into the next couple of books that he's able to really take time to see his journey and to lament back what has happened, and then the new things that affect his life, he's forced to move on.
My goodness. You know, as I was looking, I was navigating the book, looking at the books, and I noticed in Voyager, you know, chapters, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Yeah.
The year 1941, major impact and things that took place in Hawaii. I saw the University of Hawaii and some things there. So speak to us about that, because that seems to be a major time, the year 1941.
Well, it is. You know, in 1941, the United States at that time was not in the war. The military was just beginning to build up what they were calling the Pacific Fleet by putting new battleships and stuff into Pearl Harbor. Hawaii was still a very sleepy little island and was not known by too many people. The University of Hawaii was just a small school. He graduated in 1941 of a class of 38 in the whole college, of the university's engineering course. So it was only 38 students. So I did some research into the college, the size of the college, the professors at the time who gave some talks at the graduating class. So all that kind of history is actual true facts of the college and the time of the islands and what the islands were like.
Yes, that's powerful. And your ability to take the reality and the history, but then incorporate the fictional characters in there. That's powerful and a very interesting concept as you write and author that. So now the impact that it had on his life, unexpected interruptions.
Right.
You said something, Dave, that was so powerful. You said he couldn't go back because the war interrupted his original plans. Right. But then he couldn't go forward because of things that were happening. So it could appear that he was stuck, but he refused to be stuck. Speak to us about that.
Well, you're right. He's stuck. He can no longer see his vision of sailing around the world in 1 year. He's not going to be in a war that's going to last. He doesn't know how long, maybe months, maybe years, which it did. So how can he claim to be a man who sailed around the world in 1 year to join the ranks of those very few men? At that time, there had only been 3. When his whole voyage has been interrupted by years.
Yeah.
So he's forced to fight the war and try to make sense of that and change his philosophy of what he's going to have to do. And then hopefully after the war, make a decision, am I going to go around the world again? Or am I just going to sail back home? You know, so that's another dilemma that he has to be faced with, that he has to kind of work his way through.
That's powerful. You've incorporated distractions and life distractions in the book.
Right.
And then the ability to make decisions as to how you're going to proceed.
Right.
It's now that's impact. I mean, it draws interest into the book, into the mysteries of the book.
Sure. Well, that's what I was hoping to do. I was hoping to show, the actual history of the war in the Pacific. That is very factual, but weaving in a character that is like everybody else, forced with a lot of personal decisions that you're fighting a war. You as a veteran know that even though you're in a war, in a battle, you have your own personal things of what's going on at home, how is your family doing, your friends around you, the whole 9 yards. So you're dealing with all of that. So, and telling history, I think it's really powerful and good to know what the men and women that are in that environment are thinking about, what they're faced with, what they're doing. And so this is a story about that such a case.
That's powerful. Now, with you being a Vietnam era veteran, how much of that influenced the way that you wrote the book and your concept?
Well, I was in the Army, so I'm no sailor. But I think, the camaraderie that you have with your fellow soldiers is true no matter whether you're Army, Navy, Air Force. You have your band of brothers, so to speak, that you pull around you, and you learn a lot about them and their families, and you rely on them for not only being in an actual battle, but you rely on them for their personal feelings and their strength of being together as a team.
Yes.
So that I was able to take from my experience in Vietnam and place that no matter what year the soldier was in, whether it was Civil War, Revolutionary War, 1 or 2, 3, wherever it might be, that camaraderie has always been there.
Wow, that's powerful. The camaraderie just by being a member of the armed forces.
Right.
Then
right.
There's a bonding that takes place.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. I myself, I served in the Marine Corps during the Vietnam era, went in 1969. So understanding that, but just that bond when you saw another person in uniform,
Right.
it did speak volumes, spoke volumes. So it's quite interesting as you navigate this process and his life is unfolding. He's navigating the journey now, and there's life during the war and after the war, which the other books began to speak about. We have 2 minutes left. So if you would, tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you and information if they'd like to get your books. In about a minute or so, do that. Share that information with us.
Okay, well, you can get the books on Amazon under David VerValin. You look up Huaka'i, and then you'll see the 3 books, Voyager, The Dark-Haired Woman, and Full Circle. You can also get them on Amazon. So those are the 3. I will have a website. It's not up yet, but if you look under David VerValin or VerValin Books, you'll probably find a website where you can contact me if you have any questions about the books or you want to order the books through my website. That'll be available as well.
That's powerful. I tell you, it's quite intriguing. The books are awesome. You know, I looked and I reviewed the book on Amazon. I thought it quite interesting. You allowed the viewer to read several chapters, and you expose more of the book than most authors do. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And we want to thank you for being our guest today. And we're so excited. You brought such insight into the life of this person. And thank you for sharing with us today.
Well, thanks for having me on. I've enjoyed it.
It's been our pleasure. It's been our pleasure, you know, and so we want to encourage those who have joined us today on Spotlight TV. Don't forget, reach out to David, order the books based upon the information that he shared with you. And we want you to stay with us because we have some exciting trailers, some exciting information that we want to share with you. So stand by. I'm your host, Dr. Larry Carnes. This is Spotlight TV.